This is Jonathan Ferguson, the Keeper of Firearms and Artillery at the Royal Armouries Museum in the UK, which houses a collection of thousands of iconic weapons from throughout history. And on this week's episode, he's taking a look at the mech combat game Armored Core 6, a game that features some big guns.
Giant grenade launcher. It looks really more like a large bore autocannon, like a tank gun. This is my kind of mech gun, something that would be impossible for any team of infantry to operate.
Make sure to subscribe for more content from Jonathan and let us know what other games you'd like to see us cover in the comments section down below. Right, over to the mechs.
I don't think that's a coincidence with those U-shaped magazines on these pistols. So one of the things we don't have, unfortunately, is the French Union pistol with basically that design of magazine. Now this is more open to the elements than that, and than you might wish. And actually, the more I look at it, so that superficially and presumably reference-wise, it's based on this weird pistol with a extended magazine that is carried all the way to the muzzle of the firearm in order to give space for more rounds. It has to be the inspiration. But looking at it, it's quite different. It's got a partial enclosed magazine and then a weird open bit. I'm going to try and look and see if that does anything. That's really weird. So this ejects what look like normal pistol magazines. Well, not necessarily pistol, but normal firearm magazines, straight box magazines. When it's empty, those are what are ejected. This big curved thing is not being ejected. So I don't know what's going on. Guns themselves, they look Saiga AKS-74UE a bit. Yeah, the handguard design with the gas block at the front, cocking handle where it is, the top cover. It's like a really abstracted short AK design, I think. There's even a hint of the rear sight front trunnion of an AK right in the middle of the gun. So something a bit like this, which you've seen before, but we're not going to have many real guns for this episode. So let's get this out anyway. Always feels like a reach comparing guns like from games like this to real ones, but I'm fairly happy that that's been the visual reference for it. And it does strike me as a bit funny that giant robot fighting suits with rockets and we're doing akimbo pistols. Kind of nonsense for humans, but I don't know, maybe it's less nonsense for giant robots. Discuss. The actual description text here says, strictly speaking, this new unique weapon is not a true shotgun, as its area attacks, interesting turn of phrase, are enabled by firing individual projectiles from multiple barrels simultaneously. That's completely correct. This is in fact a volley gun, not a shotgun. Now the end result is much the same. There's actually a really interesting historical parallel here. I think it's interesting anyway. What am I talking about? Well, the somewhat famous Nock volley gun. 7 barrels, all at once, 50 caliber flintlock, used by the British Royal Navy, for, fighting ship to ship, all loaded individually, all fired at the same time. The result of firing this is essentially the same, a modern shotgun, whatever sort, pump, semi, doesn't matter, with a choke and buckshot, giving a certain pattern at a certain distance. This is how you did that at the end of the 18th century, beginning of the 19th century. This was a way to deliver that fairly tight pattern at distance, so you get the effect of a shotgun at a longer range. And that's exactly what they're talking about here. So instead of having one barrel and a spread of shot, you have a cluster of barrels all parallel, putting that pattern out in a straight line, rather than having it come out of a single barrel and spread in a maybe less predictable, less consistent way. Now, what's the in-universe explanation for why you would do that rather than have one barrel? Because they have breech loading, they have ammunition technology, they have chokes, they probably have electromagnetic pattern control or something. And the answer is, I don't know. And they probably don't know either. But it means you get this massive volley gun, very impressive looking, very similar to this concept. That's a really nice, or both really nice shots there. We've got showing something of the pattern, the cluster of shot. They're all tracers, of course. And then the ejection, it opens up like a giant break action revolver and a load of casings come out. So we have all this high technology, but it's still using cased ammunition because it looks cool when you reload the gun. That's the only reason for having it. Now, having talked about how you would use a cluster of barrels to create a tight pattern, we then see the massive spread of this thing. Absolutely huge spread. So it's a very video game trope shotgun, not shotgun thing. this has to be a SPAS 12. Has to be. In inspiration. But every bit of it has been changed. But the folding stock over the top, plenty of shotguns that have that aren't the SPAS 12. The sort of magazine tube being the same length as the barrel or thereabouts. I mean, depending on the muzzle device, the SPAS doesn't always look like that. This is a classic example of second-guessing designers, artists' reference. Because I can't say that this is referenced from a SPAS 12, but it's the most famous shotgun of this configuration. I would lay money on this being based on a SPAS 12, even though there is no actual component replicated from that gun. And actually, I'd be amazed if this is optionally semi-auto. This is going to be a pump gun. A pump-action shotgun for a giant mech is just very silly in my view. Now, can't say all that and not show you a SPAS 12, so here is one of ours. Not quite the same proportions, but very, very close indeed. It's funny how the butt pad of the shoulder stock there is not sitting flush. I mean, I can replicate that on this SPAS, but as soon as it gets plonked, it's going to lock down into that position. The whole point is to keep it streamlined. Maybe less of a concern when you're a however many foot tall walking machine, but why does this have a shoulder stock? And I think the answer is to reference this gun, or generically pump-action shotguns with sort of riot-style folding stocks. It's somehow funny to me that the shells, the cases there, are still classic sort of high brass, plastic hulls, rimmed brass heads, because we have to know that this is a shotgun visually. If we still have shotguns in hundreds of years, I very much doubt we're using the same ammunition for them. So it looks like it's manually operated, and there's some kind of, I have seen this done actually, inertia cocking going on, where the arm is brought sharply down and then up again, meaning that the pump handle stays where it is in space and the gun moves within it, as it were, and you cycle the gun that way. I think that's what they're doing. It's not the classic action movie, hold the pump grip and throw the gun up and down. It's the other way of doing it, which is less commonly seen, but for cool guy points. And in this case, it's because the mech's having to use it one-handed, and I guess it would have the ultimate strength and acceleration to make it work regardless. I think that's what I'm seeing. Either that or they're just glossing over it and it's actually semi-auto, but they want it to look like a pump gun. Burst machine gun. I mean, kind of all machine guns are burst machine guns, if properly operated. And machine guns, per se, do not typically have a burst limiter function on them, because it's kind of unhelpful. Arguably unhelpful on any firearm, but certainly on a machine gun. Now, this isn't a machine gun in any technical sense, except maybe the US legal sense of being an automatic firearm. At the end of the day, it's a machine pistol for this guy. Reminds me of the Hammerburst from Gears of War, actually. Referencing the AK again, clearly, with that curved mag, which somehow needs a great big armature support at the front. Not sure why. Cool design. I like the clean lines on the top there. I don't know why it has a stylized front sight, though, because there's no rear sight and no way to use the front sight, and no need for a front sight, because it's a mech. It's like they just thought there's negative space there, we need to fill it with something. Oh, okay, so that's attachment thing at the front is for an extended mag. Oh, a double mag. Okay. This kind of references the very long, I think 100 round AK mag that was developed that clips onto the muzzle of the rifle. But that's feeding in a wanna. This is, I'm not sure how that's working actually, but we have a spare mag stored at the front that somehow then finds its way into the gun. This looks like an anti-materiel rifle to me. Sort of referencing a muzzle brake, but it has sort of flaps instead, which I don't understand. Great big mag on top, like a sort of handheld Neo-Pup maybe, or like a handheld autocannon is where I was going with that. But so a big weird shaped mag on top, but then some massive what looks like an ammunition box container thingy on the bottom as well. There's a chute. There's an ammunition chute, very angled. I don't fancy the chances of the rounds making it cleanly into the gun through that, and it's very small relative to the size of the gun and even the empties that are being ejected. So they've referenced an ammunition feed, but really it looks too small and too angled to be that. Oh, hang on, those boxes on the bottom are feeding into the gun, and what's that in midair there? I'm so confused. That's the barrel. That took longer than it should have for me to figure out. So we're ejecting the barrel. I like the reference to quick change machine gun barrels. So I'm guessing overheating, maybe the ammo is infinite, I don't know. I wasn't paying attention to the HUD. And then the reload is reloading the barrel, which we have seen before in something. But I'm not clear on if the ammo is feeding from the bottom and the barrel is just being ejected. Is the top container actually for spare barrels? Because it's not big enough. I've lost the plot there, sorry. Giant grenade launcher. It looks really more like a large bore autocannon, like a tank gun. There's a recoil dampener system on top by the look of it. It's an artillery piece. It's like an anti-tank gun, but it's shooting grenades. So I guess more like an automatic mortar. It's where the line between artillery and mortars is pretty blurred. In any case, handheld, and handheld at arm's length, essentially, with no support at the front. So the wrist and hand strength of these mechs must be significant. Oh, okay, we see the rounds here. So they look like giant... This is very reminiscent of the MK-108, the German Messerschmitt 163 rocket fighter cannon. There were two of them in the belly. Very slow firing, would be quite an arcing trajectory as well, but they're used for close range. So you fly right up to a bomber, unload these explosive rounds, 30mm rounds, and then glide back to base, in theory. It's nice to see the round. Oh, there we go. Yeah, it's an auto loader. So it's a hopper on the side, not a magazine. The rounds are then conveyed on an artillery auto loader over into the breech. That's cool. This is my kind of mech gun. Something that would be impossible for any team of infantry to operate in a mobile way. That's what this is doing. Okay, napalm bomb launcher. Ultra hot, not just hot incendiary. Some weird shapes going on there. They're not there for shouldering it or holding it. They don't appear to be there for feed mechanism purposes either. Curved thing on the top, on the face of it, it would be a magazine, but it's facing the wrong way and would be feeding directly into the barrel rather than into the breech. But I think that's what it is. But then the weird shape on the back of the receiver almost looks like a magazine, like an internal magazine, but it's facing the wrong way again, the different wrong way. Giant caseless grenades. No, they're not caseless. Interesting. Little green cases that look like 40mm grenade round cases are coming out, but then the projectiles going down range look massive. Maybe it's the perspective. You know, the smoke trail thing, that's really a video game thing for indicating the arc, which you could have done with a HUD in a mech game. So I maybe wouldn't do the smoke trail. It implies that they are somehow propelled by a onboard rocket motor or something, rather than being shot as a projectile from a case. A little bit confusing, that weapon and its ammo. Giant pistols, why not? Very reminiscent of the Robocop Auto 9 in some configurations at least. It's changing literally as I look at it. Those are huge now, absolutely huge. Looks like we've got one of each there. Shorter barrel extension and a longer one. Huge long-barreled pistols kind of makes sense for robot suit fighting, because you don't have the worries of weight, unwieldiness, butt stocks. You don't have to worry about any of that. In theory, your suit keeps them on target. So all of the firearms probably should be effectively handguns, and so far I think they are actually. None of them are being rested on the shoulder, none of them are being shouldered. They're all being fired like pistols. It's just that these look more like what we understand pistols to be. And they look super cool, I have to say. Like akimboing away there with the cases ejecting, the huge long barrels flailing in the breeze. Inertia cocking of the slide there. I've seen people do that with slide operated pistols. You just like punch the pistol forward and the slide stays where it is from inertia, and the round gets chambered that way. I really like that here, because how else are you going to load the thing? Of course it glosses over the reload. The mags just find their way in somehow, but the cocking is, I like that. Another explosive launcher, charged to arrange the spray of projectiles into a vertical spread. interesting. Typically, you'd have a sort of beaten zone of wherever these things are landing with splash damage or whatever, frag damage. That's very unusual. It's like a sort of giant flaming shotgun effect that you control the spread of. Not what I was expecting at all. I was expecting a grenade launcher string in different arrangements. Oh, okay, they're little airborne, they're little projectile canisters that then burst. There's a lot of thought gone into the weapons in this game, as much as I'm kind of comparing them to real stuff and criticizing them in some ways. This is a fantasy setting, sci-fi fantasy essentially, as far as I'm concerned. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. What's cool is what matters. Oh, okay. I've completely misunderstood how this thing works. It's throwing these canisters into the air. That is cool. It's like an atlatl, where you're throwing a dart or an arrow. A bit like the dog ball throwers, if you use those. The atlatl, it basically gives you an extra long arm to throw something further and harder. This is probably referencing that, but with a mechanical setup. Pile bunker? That's not a class of weapon I recognize. A massive steel pile. Okay, so it's a spike launcher or a stake gun. Why not? Bringing it back down to boring practical concerns, these are essentially giant armored suits. So you're going to want to target the joints. An armor-piercing cannon round in any of these joints is either going to destroy that limb or bind it up. Do that. Target the joints in the armor. Or in this case, it's like shooting a tank in the tracks, effectively. Why am I talking about that now? Well, a giant steel spike and the logistics of loading and firing that at the enemy. It's not going to be as good at armor-piercing as a projectile. It's got more mass, sure. Maybe if shields were a big concern, you might want to push a slow-moving steel spike through those. But as far as a weapon for fighting other mechs goes, these things are incredibly vulnerable to any kind of competent armor-piercing gun. So on the shoulder, we've got these twin triple-barreled Gatling guns. They're very similar to, well, there's a Soviet design as well, but this might be referencing the GOU-19. And then we've got these giant, I mean, they're probably same size, weight, shape, everything as the famous GOU-8 Avenger on the 810. Again, if you're going to have giant, super strong robot tank suit things with legs, you may as well give them, well, in this case, 4 Gatling guns, but even one 30mm cannon with a huge ammo pack would actually be a tremendously effective weapon, depending what you're fighting. However, if in a world where tracks are no longer the thing and legs are, you're probably going to want a load of shoulder-mounted missiles, to be honest with you. Guided missiles more so than these great big guns. But guns are fun in games, so we'll give them a pass. Why not? If you're going to have one Gatling gun, why not have 4? I do like the enormous ammo containers. It's a nod to the real world Vulcan and the GOU-8 that have to have huge ammo containers to feed those rounds at high rates, high capacity, of course. Now, the feed on the back doesn't make a great deal of sense because they'll be in a helical style arrangement inside. They should then come out in the same plane. They're coming out the back of these canisters vertically and then feeding into the gun. But at least we have the ammo canisters, at least we have the feed chutes, and of course the big shower of brass. If these were caseless guns, it would be a bit disappointing. But you don't have a shower of brass, especially as you can fly over your enemies and rain it down like in the Matrix. Just mentioned missile launchers, and here is a set of missile launchers. I knew they'd be in the game. But paired up with a couple of little dinky, what look a bit like calicos combined with Bison submachine guns, but aren't really either of those. More hints of Picatinny rail that aren't Picatinny rail. Giant 4-pronged flash suppressors on these things. Let's see if they suppress any flash. No, not really. Although, if they weren't on there, maybe the flash would be much bigger. It's a cool looking combo there with the missile racks and the twin machine pistols, whatever you want to call them. Oh, okay, we've got the magazine is very shallow but very wide and is attached on the bottom. The big thing on the top is, unsurprisingly, some sort of optic, but the mech isn't using the optic. So this is optics as set dressing, much like the optics on all the Star Wars guns, by the way. So I can't be too hard on these guys. Missile racks, missile pods, there's less to kind of pick at there. They're quite boring in real life. They're generally either cylindrical or something approximating this shape, but with a lot less convoluted shape going on the outside. Some of the big multiple launch systems look a bit more interesting, but they're essentially just shipping containers for missiles or rockets. So they're not very visually interesting compared to these. These have got more going on. I really like the launch, the sequential launch and the nod to a reload going on there. They're very cool. The way they cock back for reloading. There's no need for them to do that, but it looks cool.
Mark! They're all to us already. Sneaky bastard.
Thanks for watching, guys. That's a little bit left field with all those giant mech guns, but that was a lot of fun to do. Hope you enjoyed it. If you can, please do check out our Royal Armouries stuff, whether that's real museums or online content. We have our own YouTube channel that you might enjoy if you have not already joined us over there. But whatever happens, we will be back here again next week.